Hello, everyone, and I hope everybody is well at home. My name, as you can see on the screen, is Avril Hepner, and I'm from the BDA in Scotland. Now, tonight's topic for discussion in our famous BSL Blethers, the conversation tonight, I'm sure will excite you because we have two people here. And we're going to talk about what it's like to be a deaf social worker. And as people at home will know that across the UK, there is a kind of national conversation about social work. In particular, we're interested in our two deaf social workers. So they're going to join us tonight and we're going to have a discussion all about their journey, what it was like. Was there any issues? Was there any positive things? We're going to have all of that discussion. And for you people at home, for all our lovely viewers, you're more than welcome to ask some questions. Now, you know how we do it. You put your questions in, and if there's time, we'll try and cover those questions. Some of your questions, maybe the topics are maybe confidential and not maybe appropriate for this forum tonight, but we can deal with that as we go on. So our first guest tonight is Lisa. Welcome, Lisa. Hi there. Can you tell us a wee bit about yourself? Well, I'm Lisa, and this is my sign name. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And you're a social worker. Whereabouts in the UK? I'm in Scotland, Avril. I work in Scotland. We'll ask you a wee bit more questions later on, but I'd like to introduce our second guest tonight. And our second guest is Sharon.
Hello. Hi.
Sharon, could you tell us your name and your sign name?
Yeah, I'm Sharon. Hello.
So whereabouts in the UK are you based?
I'm in England.
Well, that's fantastic to have two deaf social workers. Deaf social workers, not hearing social workers we're used to, but two deaf social workers. So I suppose my first question to both of you is how long have you been a social worker, Lisa? Well, I qualified 18 months ago. I got my degree in June 2023. So I'm still a newbie. So just under 2 years. Sharon, what about yourself?
Over 30 years. I've been a social worker for over 30 years now.
Wow. So tonight we actually have a lovely opportunity of a discussion about what happened maybe in previously and what's modern now. So the first question I really have to ask you is why? What attracted you to become a social worker? Sharon, can we start with you first? How did you start?
Yeah. Um, well, I got into recreation management. I was in sports and sports training and that sort of thing. And I was kind of interested in social work, but it was really in a residential school for the deaf. They offered me a job as what was known then as an unqualified social worker. I'm talking back in the 80s, 90s, unqualified social worker. So I took that job and I realized that as society was changing, and if I wanted to develop or get any promotion, I had to get qualified. So I applied at that time to the University of Bristol and on a 2-year course there and qualified as a social worker. And I've been working as a social worker ever since.
Congratulations. So it's interesting. So your journey began in something different and then changed to social work, but you were an
That's right.
unqualified social worker at that time.
So
But
called at the time. Yeah.
yeah, and now you just wouldn't dream of something like that. Lisa, what was it? What was it attracted you to social work? Really, Avril, from being a child, I would go and my parents were hearing and communication was difficult for me. And I felt as if my voice wasn't being heard, if you like. So, I honestly thought social work was out of my reach because I was deaf. I thought the only thing that I could do would be sort of in the care. care area. And again, then I thought that people didn't have their voices. Well, anyway, I met my wife, and she was studying at that time to become an interpreter. And she was saying to me, what would you like to do in the future? And I said, I really would love to be a social worker. So she encouraged me to apply, and I did. And I did it. And it's something that I'd always wanted, and I achieved it. So that's right. Your
And
both backgrounds is a deaf family.
uh,
Yours, Lisa, you were saying that you noticed that when you were wee that social workers coming in and they even really couldn't communicate with the family. Yeah, that's right. I mean, they were using pen and paper. Half the time I didn't know what they were saying. You know, we were needing help and support, but we couldn't get it because of communication. It wasn't that there wasn't a will for it. The communication barrier meant we couldn't get it. So for me becoming a social worker, I wanted to make sure that deaf people had their voices. Sharon, what was your background like?
oh no, mine was very different because mine was from an education department. Um, and so it was about, well, I suppose, my father trying to communicate with the education department about where I was going to go to school and that kind of thing. So um, it came down to helping my father. And it was only when I got involved in working with people that I realized the barriers and the lack of information available to the deaf community. I mean, I was lucky because I had deaf parents, so that information would be passed to me. But then I realized that other people weren't so lucky. And I thought, well, it's time to get involved and sort that situation out.
Well, now we've got two qualified social workers on tonight, and thank you for all of that. Could we show now a wee picture to our audience of Lisa qualifying?
Lisa Carlson. Stephen James Mather.
Wow. Congratulations, Lisa. They were lovely. Can you tell me a wee bit about your experience about university? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Was it difficult? Well, I think originally, I applied in 2018 to many universities because I wanted to become a social worker. I got quite a few rejection letters, and when I read the feedback, they were saying that what I needed to do was I needed additional qualifications before I could apply to uni. So I did that. So I did an HNC at college, and I'd done studying previously. So that I'm talking about 2018. I'd done studying way before that. So because I'd done that, I was able to jump to the HNC rather than doing any sort of other sort of preparatory work. So I then applied for two different courses in Stirling University, or the University of Stirling, give it its proper name, and also applied for social work, but also become a deaf interpreter at Heriot-Watt University. So I felt that it was very different because I knew if I went to Heriot-Watt, there would be lots of signing around, but at the university, I'd really be the only one there. So I kind of told them to hold the one at Heriot-Watt just until I sort of found out. And then I realised that when I had them in hold, that my choice was actually the social work. That's where my passion was. And I decided I'm going to change everything and I'm going to go to social work. And I'm glad I did. Now, the best thing for me was the Scottish Government or the Scottish BSL Act 2015. That's what helped me. Because of that act, I was able to get two sign language interpreters and two electronic note takers to take the notes for me. And I had that all the way through my course, you know, and it was to have one interpreter. Um, it was mean you were relying, but having two, it was that way that it was better that I felt that I was able to do things. So you really thought it
Was
was
that a
helpful?
smooth journey then, or?
Oh yeah, it was. I got the disability students allowance, and that just was completely wiped out. Obviously, with interpreting costs, but they were able to top that up, so I got all of the support. Sharon, what about your
That was lovely.
experience?
Oh, well, I mean, it's
Have
very
we got any
different. We're
photos
talking
from
about
those
some
old days?
no, we're talking about some time ago. At that time, the University of Bristol already had the deaf studies there, so there was deaf awareness around the campus, even though I wasn't in that department. Um, but there were, I asked for disabled students allowance. I got it for cameras, for note taking, for interpreters. There were no issues at all, no barriers in that sense. Everything I asked for was provided. I got all the assistance. Um, but also I got proofreading, to help me with my English and, for written work, for submitting written work, and they had good marking criteria. And I felt like I got on very well. The placement was the only issue. I had to do a hearing placement. I wasn't allowed to do a placement in the deaf community because I needed to know how the hearing community worked. Apparently, I wanted to go to a deaf placement, but I remember that hearing placement was just something I had to put in my portfolio. So I had to have interpreters with me the whole time, and I did struggle for that bit. But it was a bit of a wake-up call to see the difference between working with the deaf community and the hearing community, and to understand the problems from a different perspective. And I began to understand really the kind of barriers that some of my deaf clients were coming up against, because I hadn't experienced that before. So it was a bit of a wake-up call.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. But what's interesting and great that both of your university experiences have been really, really positive. But I want to say, Sharon, at the University of Stirling, they were we had an opposite thing. They were really wanting to encourage me to get into the deaf community. And I was the opposite. I wanted to get into the hearing world because I felt it might have been a conflict of interest, me in the deaf world. But at the same time, I thought there was maybe more opportunities within the hearing world. So that was interesting to hear Sharon's. Can I ask both of you, do you work within a deaf environment that you're social workers? Have you ever done that? Sharon, could I ask you first, have you ever worked with deaf people, or do you sort of change about? And I'm
Well, I'm in
talking
a
about at
deaf
the moment.
team. Well, at the moment, I'm in the seniority team, working with dementia. But my first job also was actually in the seniority team. But I kind of worked up to line manager, and then I think that was about 2011. The government stopped that. They decided that they didn't need specialist teams, so we were all disbanded. And then I worked with safeguarding, quite a lot of mainstream, quite a lot of hearing community work as well. So it was quite interesting to see the different perspectives. But then I worked in a deaf-blind unit, which I enjoyed immensely. And obviously that meant it wasn't full BSL, so that was a challenge in terms of communication. And then I went back to the seniority team again. So it's been a big, long journey. My social work journey has been quite circular.
Wow, a 30-year journey. Wow. Lisa, what about yourself? Well, I'm in a hearing team. I actually deliberately decided to work within a hearing team. I want to be within the deaf community, but I was worried that if I went in there first, maybe there wouldn't be that relationship with the deaf professional. So what I was thinking, if I went into the hearing world first, I would understand what a deaf professional in social work, what that would be like, and then and the boundaries and the limitations and everything else that we do. So my idea was that I would then teach the deaf community. So we learn so much, there, and it could be at the moment or the moment I'm there with the hearing people, I'm enjoying it, but it could be in the future, it might be a change. So you've said you're within the local authority there. Do you feel you're being influenced about certain things you didn't know before? And I suppose the same question to you, Sharon.
I've worked in the council before. I worked with the rehab team, and I also work with the equipment and those kind of social workers there. So it wasn't just working within the team. You do a lot of liaison with social workers from outside, because most social workers are overworked. So most people don't know how to book interpreters and so on. So they'll come to you and ask you to liaise with them. And that's a learning opportunity for them. So then they'll say to their colleagues, oh, Sharon knows all about that. So I'll get people come to me, and, it's usually about how do you book interpreters, that sort of thing. And I think they learn that that's how deaf life is, but they're very far behind on the curve, compared to other clients. So I think it's important that a lot of hearing people within social work don't understand these issues, and it's good for them to learn. It's good for them to have these experiences. We have CPD, continuing professional development, within social work, and so they could tick off a lot of their CPD points because they've been learning about deafness and deaf awareness. So I think we do have a strong influence on the broader social work profession.
Do you both work with deaf clients at all? Well, Avril, I work with hearing clients. I've got no relationship with any deaf people. It's only hearing people that I deal with. The interpreters that are coming are working with me directly. I remember my first year, I was just newly qualified. So there was lots of assessments, lots of reviews that had to be done in me as well, but also the team that I'm in is older people. Yeah, we have different groups for social work. So that's the over 65s, maybe looking at care packages, maybe get into a care home. But once I'd sort of submitted my CPD for the first year, that was me officially recognised as a fully qualified social worker, and I was able then to get into adult protection. So I'm now responsible for gathering information, and it's an I'm responsible for gathering this information for social work from them and giving it to other professionals. You know, anybody that is it's involved in that person's life, I will then write a report up, an adult protection report. We have 3 criteria that we match, and that's just part of the process. So if 2 of the criteria is matched and 1 doesn't, it's not adult protection, it goes to maybe care management or something. It can be a bit complicated.
All right, can I just clarify that then? So you're focusing on 65 plus, and these are hearing people, and you're getting referrals, and you're assessing them, and the assessment is a 3-part assessment. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? No?
Well, sometimes it's not just a referral from themselves. It could be a referral from the doctor. It could be the police because they've discovered or they feel that person may be at risk. So it's my duty and responsibility to do that investigation to make sure, or really to evaluate if that's the case. So the first one is about their safeguarding and well-being, second's about self-harm, and the third is if they have a disability. So if the 3 criteria are met, that person can then go into adult protection. If they're not, then they would go in somewhere else.
You have to tick all those boxes, right?
Yeah, it's all about meeting the criteria. Um, and we would have 2 council officers who would go to the house and interview them. And sometimes that can be challenging, because the conversation maybe is said. And then when I do up the report, I'll make sure that everything within that is all right in English and everything that I've said.
Okay, so you're focusing on 65 plus. Sharon, what about you? Oh, all adults, 18 and over. So I work with old people, young people, physical disabilities, deaf people. I do work with deaf. I work with BSL users because I understand the barriers. Mostly, if you're a sign language user, how do you access the services? So we tend to have somebody who goes with the clients, and that's we have our own clients and we have our own caseload, but we also go with all deaf clients to meet their other referrals. But all of my clients are sign language users.
Have you ever worked with hearing clients, Sharon?
Well, I'm sometimes working with hearing families, with their care packages, and often it's about people's attitudes, people not fulfilling their care packages, people not necessarily being great interpreters, and so not being able to make the assessments appropriately, and also, you can get abuse in care and those kinds of things. So we're dealing with that. We're dealing with fraud, people being defrauded, where the police might be involved. So we're making sure that people have their rights and things that are delivered properly. You know, sometimes not all families are happy. Sometimes there are court issues and
Yeah,
legal
because
issues around the
it's
family.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, often, social workers aren't dealing with perfect scenarios. They're not dealing with the positive, but that your aim is to get the best quality of life for the client and to make sure that they get their rights delivered.
Could I ask, I mean, you've mentioned, both of you, about interpreters working with you. Do you use access to work, or do you have a limit with them, maybe like 3 days a week? Sharon, can I start with you?
I have interpreters Monday to Friday, 9 to
Wow.
5. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because
Just one
I get calls
interpreter?
from hearing. Well, I have a team of interpreters, and I have one interpreter at a time from that team. But some days, it's really quite pressurized. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of phone calls, maybe from hearing people. There might be, meetings, with a social worker, from, at the set hours. So we have kind of, I have to plan my day really, to make sure that there are breaks in between for the interpreters, because I can't really just go solidly. So sometimes that means, well, you're working with other social workers' timetables, so you're trying to fit everything in. You're trying to dovetail their availability, the interpreter, having a break. So sometimes I tend to book meetings 1 till 3. But I try and avoid stretching my hours too long. I try and do a lot of work on remote, before I then do home visits, because it's really important sometimes to meet a client face to face and have those meetings in person. So if I can get all of my Zoom calls and things out of the way, and my paperwork out of the way, but yeah, being able to work online and being able to have remote telephone calls has changed my life enormously. So I don't have the same interpreters.
So
I
you
tend
you
to,
kinda you book them
every
then?
day, but I tend to, yeah, I review them every year. So ATW, I review at the end of the year. I ask the interpreters if they want to keep going with me. Sometimes people are off sick or they have holidays. It's a very small team. We have a little WhatsApp group. So it's not the same interpreter every day, but it's the same pool of interpreters that I work with.
Lisa? Okay, I was so interested to watch Sharon then. I do the same. I have Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And every 2 weeks, I have a compressed day. And what that means is we have a day off. I have that because sometimes you're just overwhelmed. So what you do is you sort of work a wee bit earlier and a wee bit later so she can get that extra day off. So I have 2 interpreters, just 2. One does a Monday, Tuesday, another one does a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, say for example, I'm at my work and I'm not finished, and then then I need to do it tomorrow. Well, the way I look at it is that if I've got the same interpreter, then they've got the knowledge, I've got the same voice. But sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes random things happen, emergencies. But I try to sort of work it in a way that it works for me. I feel very comfortable with the interpreter there now. They're working with my team as well, so that's good. They're not just sort of like glued to a wall, and they're with me all the time. Even at lunchtime, we go together. We just hang about, and that's good. When I go to visit clients, I do face to face. Remotes for our clients, we're not there yet. There's some other people that are doing it, but for me, it's mostly face to face. Because for me, I mean, I'm dealing with people who are over 65. Technology is not their friend a lot of the time. And also, when you go face to face, you can catch other things, the environment, the home, other things that you're trained to spot.
I can see that would be useful. Okay, and we've got some questions coming in from our audience here. So let's have a look at what we've got in the inbox here. We've got a question from Stuart Parkinson. He says, we've lost social workers for the deaf in Wales due to Welsh Government policy. We now have independent living services who are not deaf aware, and they tend to phone instead of texting deaf people to assess them. So, you know, what happens to the assessments there? What is it that you do? Well, you need somebody in Wales to stand up for this and to advocate and challenge that. Because, you know, through COVID, for example, you know, there was no deaf access, you know, and it was all on the phone, which of course was not appropriate for deaf people. So a couple of us in our team did lots of texting, lots of, remote calls. And we realized, you know, that, you know, we just had to get on and do that because it wasn't readily available. And a couple of deaf people actually sued the services. So you need some people in Wales to be assertive, to challenge that, to call the government to account on that. I know it's difficult to do, but
I would agree.
you know, you need somebody inside who's fighting for that. Because that's the only way you're going to challenge it and the only way you're going to win. You need to work together and you need to, so I'm sorry, Stuart, but you do need to be proactive on that, I think.
Thank you, Sharon. I'll just have another wee look and see if we've got more questions coming in. The questions are coming fast and furious. We've got Caroline Mullins. And the question from Caroline is, there's so much paperwork in terms of mental capacity assessments, etc., continuing healthcare and safeguarding inquiries. There's not enough services in the third sector for preventative work, for early intervention, for deaf people, as opposed to there's many in mainstream. Do you agree?
I totally agree. There's not enough third sector work with deaf people. I mean, a lot of deaf people don't even know they can get their interpreters paid. And also a lot of these things are only accessible through a lot of paperwork in English. So, you know, even getting assessments is not straightforward. We have to make sure that prove that a person is not understanding or is not understood in order to get an interpreter. So, you know, there's recently been a court case, a scenario of MCA, mental capacity assessment, where the social worker who's hearing felt the deaf person couldn't do it, and they were getting the wrong information. So they were wrongly assessed for mental capacity. So yeah, it's not there yet.
We have in Scotland, we don't have the same as you. We have the same, but it's a different name. It's adults with incapacity, and we have similar assessments. Yeah, but I mean, I agree. There is real barriers, particularly within the third sector. I mean, our team are very deaf aware. Why? Because I'm there. They've had to be. So that's been good. And I've been talking to my colleagues about looking for, you know, funding to make sure we had an interpreter there. And we were asking, you know, but what would we get if someone's looking for a request? And we're thinking, you know, we need some sort of ring fence funding that they could then access to pay for an interpreter. Now that sounds all dead simple, but it's not. It's really complex and easy. But what we need is the third sector, I believe, coming together, you know, and doing training, because it's not happening. You know, it's really hard. You know, we're all trying our best working on it, but we're still not getting there fast enough.
We need to stand up against it and challenge it. We really do.
So Sean Noon has a question, or rather, he's saying that it's always been a challenge to find the right interpreters for particularly jobs like yours. Not many interpreters are familiar with the specific areas such as NRM, MARF, ACEs, trauma, CP, all of the acronyms that go with social work. Do you think there should be specific training for interpreters? Maybe that they could go on specialised training? Oh God, yes, absolutely, Avro. Um, there was nobody there that had been through any sort of training, so I was basically having to get put the interpreter through a crash course in social work, getting them up to speed with all the jargon, with all the kind of the things that would typically be used with social workers, so that they could pick up and understand what they were saying. Because social work language is like any profession, it's its own kind of language, and we use specific words, So then I would be able to ask, look, this is what are they saying? And the interpreter then would respond to me using the correct words as well. So it's getting the I think we really should have some sort of specialised training, because deaf people are getting into those professions, and our interpreters maybe have not got that additional training. We need them up to speed so that we can work very quickly together. Sharon, what about
And that's
you?
why it's important, I think, to keep the interpreters. And that's why I ask my interpreters every year, are you going to come back with me? Because they're familiar with the jargon, they're familiar with the legislation, they're familiar with the policies and procedures. And it's really, really useful to know that you're working with an interpreter who understands that and, and is prepared to take on new information. So that team, if somebody leaves my team, it's all of that, and also being able to match my voice, being able to reflect me properly. So I don't want to rely on someone else's interpreter, because I'm not certain that they're going to reflect what I'm saying correctly and accurately. It's not easy. Interpreters themselves need training. I agree. I think that's right.
So I suppose Sean's
It's difficult,
question
though.
is maybe to sort of the and training agencies out there, that maybe they should be develop some sort of social work kind of training thing, so that for interpreters, if they're maybe asked to do a job, they can do it with confidence, and it would save the deaf person using time that they've had in their own job to teach the interpreter. Yeah, and Avro, I agree as well, because there's so many more deaf people get into these roles. So it's important that we have interpreters that are able to do that. Now, for my two interpreters, I feel that my interpreters are fantastic, because, and I'll be honest, I actually prefer interpreters who've come from an academic background, that have been to university and got degrees. The reason being is that they understand the journey. It's not saying anything about people who've done the NVQ route, but for me, I think part of that are the trainings there, that they should be doing the extra training. That's a preference for me.
So that's worth interpreters thinking about, isn't it? Getting extra training on dementia and social work and that kind of thing. Yeah, in their CPD. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think they should add how they deal with emotional trauma. And it's vicarious emotional trauma, because the interpreter's there with me, and whether you like it or not, that trauma is there. It's vicariously coming through them. It's okay for me. I can
Yeah,
maybe get help
that's
with my
true.
supervisor, but not for the interpreters. And also, everything about our work is so confidential.
The
You know,
confidentiality, yeah.
Absolutely. And then when we go there could be, a real emotional disclosure. We don't know what we're getting. So I have to make sure that the interpreter's mental health is good, because if their mental health goes down, I've no doubt they'll quit my job. And I need them, and it's a value. So I'm investing in them, and I'm hoping they invest in me. We have, in social work in Fife, we have these fobs, and they're basically SOS fobs. And what it is, because we're lone workers, is that if we're in danger at all, we press this button, automatic an alert to let them know, the police, where I am, and it also lets our team know as well. Now, this fob allows you to speak, but obviously I'm deaf, I can't hear the response. So they've now introduced a text mechanism, and they just text me to say if I'm okay. And that is made it's really, really, really good. But they never check with the interpreter. And that's something I'm looking about it. I mean, I didn't know, sometimes when you were going into people's house, you didn't even know what was going in. And I would maybe get in first, and then the interpreter was at the door. So it was always a case of I'm thinking, right, I'm the worker here. I go in first. If anything's going to happen, I deal with it, and the interpreter's behind. And on the way out, I make sure the interpreter goes out first. So I've got responsible for them as well.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I've got some emotionally disturbed clients, and so some of their experiences, it's very difficult. If the interpreter doesn't know their background and what they've been through,
Maybe it's a trigger as well.
so we have to, make sure that I've got the right interpreter from my team. And we have had one or two situations that have been very upsetting and they haven't been comfortable. And I want my interpreters to be able to say, I'm not comfortable with that. And I can swap them in for another interpreter, because there are some difficult situations. I mean, like you say, we've lost our fobs now. We're supposed to be getting some new technology, but when that's coming, I don't know. So yeah, sometime in the future.
You just keep asking,
yeah.
Sharon, you ask.
There's some good things about working with deaf people, right?
Sharon, you've made an excellent point when you talk about what people are like and the backgrounds. They don't know. Well, what I do is I always have a conversation in the morning, and I think about the clients I've got, and I've been able to work out who's better. Now, my interpreter has a nursing background. One of the interpreters, so her skin's is thick. She's used to that. She's seen it, and she can understand. So I feel, you're right. Their backgrounds and their experience really work with us too.
That's good. It does depend on the situations, doesn't it?
I think I found that deaf people sometimes get mixed up with what's a social worker's role and what's an advocate's role, and sometimes think they're one and the same. Could you explain the difference? Or maybe the other same, maybe I'm wrong, Sharon.
No, well, a social worker like me, I'm there. I do advocate for deaf people, but every deaf client also has the right to have their own advocate, someone speaking for them to clarify their position. And that can be somebody separate from me. I'm there to assess, to make sure, to provide a care package. I can tweak the care package to make sure that the client is happy with it. But if they want somebody to challenge that and to question my assessment and question the care package, they might need their own advocate.
Right. Okay. Can we go back a bit, Sharon? Right. You get a deaf client, and if you've to advocate, what's the boundaries? What do you mean?
Yeah. So if it's an assessment situation and there's been a referral, I might say, oh, I think this client needs this. They might need an advocate, and I can state that in the assessment. I can state that as part of the care package. Like the client might need more than care. As a social worker, I can say you can't have this, you can have this, you can't have that. It goes in the care package. But as a deaf person, I can look at a deaf client and I can go, okay, the deaf person has the right to this, that, and the others. Often the words are very difficult in these assessments, so the translation can be quite difficult. So very often we'll meet and we'll go through all of the possible, available things, and we'll talk about the degree to which the person might need this, and we'll adapt the care package to them. So in a way, I'm advocating for that deaf client, but I may advocate that they get their own advocate, if you see what I mean.
Got you. Yep. So, I mean, you're then, you can ask for an advocate if you feel, if a deaf person feels they need extra support. You can have 3 of you within that assessment.
Yes, Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Yes. Because their job is to speak up for the deaf client, and there should be a comfortable relationship between them so that the deaf person can say, oh, I want this. Like, I mentioned deaf blind people before, working with deaf blind people. One of my clients, deaf blind clients, has an advocate who challenges me, and I go, okay, I have to think about the budgets, I have to think there's only so many thousand a year, and we discuss it, and we make adjustments to the care package accordingly. And I might go to my the powers that be and say this client wants this. That might be refused on budgetary grounds, and I'll come back and we'll re-advocate. But I think it's easier to have a deaf person, because I think you need to be aware of the culture, you need to be aware of the barriers, you need to be aware of, so I can advocate as a deaf person, but I think you may need to bring in other advocates. Sometimes you get a hearing person who's fluent in sign language and they can do that role as well, but it's about meeting the client's needs and expressing their needs and getting their rights guaranteed.
It's watching Sharon, it's made me realise that mine is a wee bit different. A lot of our people maybe have dementia or things, and I look through all the criteria for their their care. So for me, I'm kind of like, I'm picking up their words. It's their words that I'm looking for that indicate to me whether they need someone else. So I'm looking, if they're able to have a conversation and I'm feeling it's at a balance and I'm getting the right answers, then that's fine. But if it's a case that you feel you're maybe not getting their voice, because people have the right to express what they want to say, and it should be done clearly and fairly. I don't have the right to make up things or assume. So it works the same, but it's a wee bit different. And that's really, really good.
Well, thanks both for clarifying that. And I'm sure our deaf audience are now more aware of that they have a right to an advocate when they're negotiating their care package and their care plan. And what else?
I mean, yes, I've wrote care package about the house, long-term care as well. So that could be long-term care at home, or it could
Or
be getting into
domestic care?
long-term
Okay.
care. Yep. It could be whether we're getting some care coming in during the day, maybe a nurse or something, or it is into residential care. It could be that we maybe need a mental health nurse. It could be behavioural issues due to the dementia. We have to work out strategies how to support. I mean, honestly, it would be here all day to go through all the things that we have to go through.
Anything to add, Sharon? No, not really. I mean, I just think it's all about the care package, really. And the government has changed something called self-directed payments. They've now introduced self-directed payments. And as an individual, if you can cope with the finances, then you have a right to do it. And most deaf people aren't all that skilled at that. So they have an advocate come in. And we also have a financial assessment, which means you pay a fee, a contribution to your care. It might be £100 a week or something like that. So you might get £100 from the social services, and you might top it up with £40. The client might. Those started off with £30, but they're going up now. £100, £140 a week. So the financial contribution, I think, is something that deaf people need to be aware about. And if you don't pay for that, you might not get care. There's no more DEAF. Deaf people are entitled to all things for free. That doesn't happen anymore. You have to be prepared to pay for care that's ongoing now, and obviously that's subject to individual assessments. Not everyone is the same. It varies depending on your background, your social situation, your family, who you have to care for you. All that's taken into account in the assessment, but you're not entitled to everything for free. The council may expect you to make a contribution, and deaf people are often quite shocked by that. They often find that very challenging. and if you refuse that, you might not get care. But obviously, if you're paying for private care, that's going to be much more expensive. Or you can make a private healthcare arrangement that works best for you. So we're getting a lot of difficulty and a lot of difficult situations around that at the moment.
Can you believe we've actually been chatting for 45 minutes? I can't believe it myself. It's been fascinating. I mean, just even watching you tonight, I'm imagining it's a stressful job. So how does that work for you, Lisa? Well, Avril, I have a supervisor and I'm part of a team, so we share, you know, and also you have to learn how self-care management, that's part of your job. So, for example, I work from home every Thursday. It helps me with childcare. So, I make sure I don't have any home visits on a Thursday. So, I know that my diary for that week is filled up. I will make sure there's no gaps. If there's any gaps in my diary, that will be filled up with a new case. And because we're part of a team, you learn how to communicate with each other. I mean, you're still working, and I'm still working on it, but that's part of the journey as well. So how did you
It's pretty
cope then?
similar.
30 years?
It's pretty similar for me. I mean, I've become used to it over time, but really, as Lisa said, I manage my schedule and I prioritize things. If something's urgent and really needs to be done tomorrow, then I might roll something else over to the next day because I've prioritized something else. So I make those decisions. I prioritize my diary. I make sure that the communication is in place, to facilitate my diary.
So I suppose it's priorities, guys, all the time. And
Yeah,
like you have to be ready to firefight. Absolutely, because every day is a new day. You know, so what
you've got
happens
to
if
be
you're in a
flexible. Yeah.
situation if two emergencies happen at the same time? Well, for us in my office in Scotland, uh, um, adults are the adult protection's priority. So we have a kind of like we then know what case we do first. So we have a system where we can work out the priorities.
We have a similar situation. We have a PA who's working from home, so I can text them and say, "Look, I've got to go out on this emergency. There's a communication issue. There's no support," and so I'll pass other things onto them. And they'll deal with the paperwork and they'll make all the applications and everything. So that's all happening at the same time. It's a kind of simultaneous approach. Um, um, and different areas have their own programs. It's not all the same, so we have to kind of put information to a central kind of interface so that we know where everybody's gone and what they're doing. It's not easy, but it is important to keep up to date with that, and you can produce some funny situations sometimes. But
So there's a big balance with the admin and meeting the clients as well. And as we talked about just earlier on about, boundaries and, the stress of the job. And sometimes people are like, oh, social workers, you're seen as the child grabbers or the nosy people, And I'm sorry
mm-hmm.
saying this to you, phrase, but that's sometimes how do you feel about that? Well, Avril, do you know what? I accept that social work may not be the popular job, but people think, and they think they were the child snatchers. But there's lots. Sharon spoke about her working in the sensory department. You can work with children. My degree covers children, criminal justice, addictions, and adult protection, and older people. So you've got loads of different areas. Most people, I think, tend to think that we've got the one role and we're the child snatchers, but we're not. We have many, many roles. I'm sure deaf people have had experience where they've went to the pub and there's been an event and some fights happened and all deaf people have been banned. They go the next day because someone had a fight, some random deaf person, and because of that, the whole of the deaf community are there tarnished with the same brush. That's the same as social workers. You know, we've been tarnished with this really outdated, fashioned view, but our primary
Yeah.
role is to keep you guys safe That's it. We're about looking at the positives, and I want to make sure people know that and that we're here to help. That's our whole purpose. And like any professions, there's some of us are fantastic and some of us are maybe not so fantastic. But our whole thing in here is to work with the community. Please, please don't ever be sitting at home and worried. Please work with social work. They're there to help. You can get an interpreter. They can listen. You can get your voice heard. You know, and we need to really sort of educate deaf people as well as the interpreters on how to do it. Sharon, if
And
you
I
get
think it
anything to
is.
add.
I think it is difficult because some areas are seen as more positive than others. When we're providing things, that's seen as very positive, but when we're making interventions, that's very difficult. So some areas are harder than others. It's more difficult to be seen positively when you're working in some areas.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have got deaf people firing in lots of questions regarding the topics we've been talking about tonight. Sean Noon has asked about how do you maintain the hardest thing, the boundaries between work and personal life when you're a member of the deaf community? I know you would keep everything confidential, but how does it affect you? Can you share with us what that's like?
Yeah, I've done this for a long time, and I think the deaf people are aware of that. In my local community, they know that I can't talk about anything. I don't talk about work. You know, um, my friends that when I get together with my friends, we just do not talk about work. I talk about my life. I talk about my family. I talk about those kinds of things. But everybody knows that that's an absolute boundary with me. That we don't talk about work. I'm there in the moment, advocating whatever when I'm being professional. But when I'm out partying, that's my life, and I do not talk about my work. That's a separate life for me. They're two separate lives, and I think deaf people see that and have seen that over the years, and I think that makes it very comfortable. I once went to a funeral to show my respects to a client, and then I didn't go to the wake afterwards because that's not my role there. I went back to work. So it's about knowing clearly and indicating clearly what your boundaries are.
Sharon, you've just actually explained why I went into the hearing world first. I wanted to avoid that. I thought I wanted to keep my deaf world, private life separate from my work life. So when I go into work, people don't know anything about me, and that's good. And that's how I'm coping just now.
Yeah.
Regarding confidentiality, it's essential, and like Sharon, you know, I don't talk about it. It's work. And I've got the pleasure of being in two worlds. During the day I'm in the hearing world. So I think sometimes if I was to go into the deaf world, it'd be difficult. My parents are deaf. So, to me, it's a kind of red flag if I went in and mixed with them. I just think the risk there, maybe in the future, when I become more experienced and people know me better and I'm more
Maybe
happy,
10
it'll
years
be
time.
different.
10 years time,
Yeah,
Lisa. We'll ask
yeah,
you the same question again. Yeah.
yeah. I'm too new just now. I'd rather stay and learn the craft first.
All
So
right,
could I
thanks
ask
for
both
that,
of
for your
you?
information on boundaries. I want to ask both of you. Scotland. Let's take Scotland for an example. Do you know how many deaf social workers are in Scotland?
So there's only two of us. There's John that qualified, and me, and there's someone in third year at the moment. So eventually we're going to have 3 deaf qualified social workers.
So there are 2 active social workers in Scotland and one in the pipeline. Do you think that's enough?
Oh, not nearly enough, Avril.
And yet there used to be social workers, and a lot of those have gone by the wayside now. So we're losing social workers and not getting many more in. How many for you, Sharon? I'm at 35 to 40. I would say there's quite a sizable. I might be wrong. I might be wrong with that estimation, but I'm guessing. Maybe some of our viewers will correct me, but I think we've got quite a sizable group but most of us work alone. So everyone's working in quite isolated. I think there are some who work where there is 2 or 3 together, but I think most people are working across England, kind of in isolated, on their own in a team. I think there are some who work kind of 2 or 3 deaf social workers together, but I think most of them that I know work on their own in their area.
Could I ask, I know confidentiality is imperative as your job, but do you have any kind of like colleagues that you can share information with, or
Oh
you
yeah,
can
we
share
talk
it with
about
anyone?
we talk about new policies, policy changes, that kind of thing. We don't talk about details of clients or anything like that. No, we keep it superficial, but yeah, sure.
Do you find the profession, social work, do you think it's declining? Compared to previous years? Well, I think so, Avro. Sharon, what about you?
Don't really know how to answer that question. Is it in decline? I'm not sure, because I think there are still new social workers coming up. So I don't know how to answer that question.
So now you're in a career as a social worker. What's next? Is there promotion opportunities? The fact that you're deaf, is that a barrier? Or are you competing with all of these hearing people for the same job? What do you think? Do you think there's promotion for you?
Well, I've been promoted. I've been promoted twice to a team leader. Just frozen screen a little bit here.
Oh, right. And then I'd moved to another department as well.
And so I've stood in for leaders, but it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's still a bit of a hearing world, because they all talk to each other at a certain level. It's possible, but I don't know. It's a lot of name dropping, a lot of networking. I don't think it's common, but I think it's possible, is my answer to that.
Well, I think here in Scotland, that we have the opportunity of promotion, but in Scotland it's quite strict. You have to go and achieve more qualifications at university, and then
Okay.
you can go up. So it could be in the future that I would get maybe a senior social worker, maybe hopefully a manager, but we have to do like maybe even a PhD in different qualifications. My aim really is I would love to be a lecturer on social work, and then we can
That's
get
great.
lots of deaf people in, but also I can contribute to the conversation and the way things are working. I'll be an influential, hopeful person in there. That's my aim, and change things for the better. Sandra Davis just wants to let you know we've got 3 deaf social workers in Hertfordshire. Thank you,
Oh, 3,
Sandra,
that's
for
terrific.
sharing that.
That's terrific. Yeah, perfect.
You both have said that you get support if you're stressed and you get supervision. Lisa had mentioned that you get supervision. What about you, Sharon, as well?
I get from my manager. If there's something I'm not comfortable with, I can always discuss anything anytime. So there are avenues. I think I feel fine, feel supported.
For me, it's regular supervision with manager, but we also in our team we have 3 seniors in our team. So we're all attached to social works, maybe 2 or 3 is attached to one senior, so we can go and ask for help or advice at any time. And my team are all learning sign language, so that's
Oh, that's
brilliant, and
great, Lisa.
it's really helping the bond. Well, let's hope that continues. That sounds amazing. Is there any time you ever deal with deaf-blind clients?
Uh-huh.
Or maybe hearing clients who are blind? Have you ever came across that?
Yeah, I've got deafblind clients. Yeah.
Lisa? As I said, most of my clients are over 65, so sensory issues are there. There will be, a decrease in eyesight and hearing. So, but okay, I'm looking at the time. We're nearly finished. I'm looking at all my questions. I think we've covered everything. So I want to ask you, what would be your hopes and dreams and aspirations for social work in the future? Starting with you, Sharon.
I think, like Lisa said, university, I think I've done a lot of training. I've been asked to do a lot of statutory training about sensory awareness. And so I think going to university, the problem is that there's a sort of ceiling with university because the programs tend to be modular. And I think we're missing things, they tend to be about safeguarding, mental health, those kinds of things, but there's not a module about disability, about deafness, about sensory things, about communication in particular, how to book interpreters, how to, maintain eye contact, gestures that you can use, that kind of thing. And when I do train people, they're absolutely gobsmacked and they're delighted to get the training. But I think that seems to me to indicate that there's a real need. So I think if universities could add that module into the training, I think that would be a good future step.
So you're thinking that actually, as part of the social work degree, there should be a module on how you communicate with deaf and deafblind people?
Yeah, language deprivation, for example, because a lot of people talk about learning disability. It's not learning disability. It's about access to communication. It's about barriers to information. It's about, so I think that's something that we need to aim towards getting people to study.
I mean, here in Scotland, Avril, we're a wee bit different. We've already got courses. I mean, we have a
Oh, you
deaf
do?
awareness
Wow.
course. Yeah, all the hearing people have to do it, and then when you go in your placement, you can get deaf awareness as well. Also, we have modules that are about disability, but it's like having a good conversation with someone who has a disability, and it shows you how to have these conversations. I think for the future, I think we're very lucky in Scotland that we've got things sort of set up and we're getting access here and we're supported with that. But I think really is there's a lot of things within the social work that we're not getting taught. Like, it would be maybe I think that if you get into sort of nursing and care, it might be more easy, but for social work, I think for deaf people, it could be a bit difficult. So I think social work, if we could get all of the social workers all together and actually get them to ask, how do you communicate? Ask us all the questions you wanted to ask, and then we could tell you because the Scottish Government asks us, you know, how do deaf social workers do their job? So, sometimes we're doing these things, but the people don't know how we're doing it.
Okay,
Well,
we're almost out of time, folks. So let's have a look at the last question here. If you wanted to say something to the population, the deaf community of the UK about social working, what would it be?
Well, my message to everybody, you can do anything you want. If someone like me can do it and become a social worker, you can do it. You can be a doctor, you can be a nurse. Go for it. You have the ability.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Have a go. And we need more people. Do it. Do level 1, level 2, level 3. Just keep going, keep learning. Ask people. There's, I'm here. Lisa's here. You can ask us what's involved. Ask other people in your local area if you want to know more about it. Ask around. Get the information. Go for it. Go for it. It'd be great.
Oh, thank you so much, Sharon and Lisa, for your time. It's been brilliant. We've had lots of comments. Thank you for answering your questions. And
Oh,
thank you for
thank you.
watching at home.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.